those towards the end of the webinar. And now I'll turn it over to Seth Fife.
All right. Well, thank you, Parthavi. Hi, everybody. It's Seth Fife from Charter Communications. I'm a C2HR board member, and I'm excited to introduce today's webinar. We're able to offer these quality education programs for free thanks to our C2HR champion sponsors, the Cable Center, Comcast, NBCU, Warner Media, Univision, and of course my company, Charter Communications, and all of our sponsors. We really couldn't do this without you, and we really appreciate all that you do for us. So the HR Knowledge Center is also a great thing we want to make sure you're aware of. It's a great perk of your membership. So you go to c2hr.org, and it's got a great curated collection of over 500 different resources and articles on popular HR topics, including the types of things that Laura is going to be talking to you about right now. So definitely encourage all of you to visit that Knowledge Center after the webinar today and make it a place you try to visit quite regularly, and you'll see a lot of newsletters and other information from C2HR. So this month, we're also launching these exchange concepts where they're going to be a collection of networking events for members only that will be able to build some cross-company connections. This month, we're featuring 2 of them, learning and development and diversity, inclusion, and equity. So I'm very familiar with the learning and development one. I ran a similar version of a discussion at the C2HR conference back earlier last year, and I'm going to be launching that later this month with the L&D community and all those interested in that topic as an example. So looking forward to that. More information will be coming out about registering for those exchanges in the next few weeks and throughout the year. So today's speaker I'm very excited about. So Laura Fields is a member of my talent team here at Charter. She's our Senior Director of Recruiting and Operations and Selection. And she's going to be sharing some best practices that we've been fine-tuning over the last couple of years, and has some great information to share about mitigating biases in the recruitment and selection process. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to Laura.
Thanks so much, Seth. Before I get rolling into the content, I just kind of want to set the stage by talking a little bit about Charter and our brand Spectrum. Charter is the 2nd largest cable provider in the US. We have just over 96,000 employees. And in order to support that workforce and to support our product and the delivery of our product to all of our customers, we make about 42,000 hires a year. And that requires our recruiting professionals to screen and assess and make decisions about 1 million candidates. This is a lot of volume. So that's just kind of an overview of what hiring is like at Charter. And then the next thing that I wanted to talk about was I wanted to just define what I mean by bias in the hiring process. And from my point of view, this is when any information enters the hiring process that is not job related. A bias-free hiring process is one that is singularly focused on using job-related information to select the best applicant for the job. When I sat back and I thought about like the places where bias can appear in the employee selection process, there are three places that really jump out to me. The first is who's deciding to apply for the posted jobs, who's the job getting in front of, and then who's actually clicking on the application button. Next place is what I call early stage screening, which is when recruiters are going in and making early decisions about who to keep, who to move forward in the process, who to decline, and who to maybe kind of put on the back burner. And then the final stage is really when those candidates get in front of whoever's making the hiring decision, the business leader, whoever it is, when they're going to, in most cases, conduct some type of interview and decide who will eventually get the offer. So in each of these three main areas, I think that there are a lot of options, and I think there's a lot of different levers that you can pull to kind of help reduce bias. some, to me, are table stakes. Some require a pretty big monetary investment and partnering perhaps with somebody outside of your organization. And really, I just wanted to focus on one thing from each of these areas that we at Charter have really been working on over the past couple of years. So the three things that I'm really going to focus in on today are a Fit Finder assessment, virtual job tryouts, and then on-demand video interviews. And interestingly, I did not start out planning it this way, but none of these three things are something that my team does alone. We have a great vendor partner with Modern Hire that we work with, and they actually provide the science and the platform that fuels each of these three things. So I'm going to start at that first step, the application decision, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our Fit Finder assessment. So depending on how exactly your organization works, your recruiters and or your recruitment marketing team probably puts a lot of time and effort into finding a way to attract job seekers to your brand, your postings, and everything like that. But all of these efforts aren't necessarily effective if the job seeker has some type of internal bias that makes them unwilling to consider a job. As an example, if a female sees technician in a job title, would her internal biases dissuade her from considering the job as something that she could be successful at? Or maybe, do you have jobs in your organization with titles that would be difficult for a job seeker to discern really what the job entails and if he or she would be qualified for it? I know at Charter, a few that jump out for me are day of job rep and media traffic specialist. Those are definitively ones that when I started here, I had to read the job descriptions because I was like, I don't know what this is. And so a job seeker may quickly dismiss these unfamiliar titles as ones that they wouldn't be qualified for, and that really might not be the case. So in order to address this, we've worked with Modern Hire to develop a very short assessment that job seekers would take prior to applying for a job. And in this assessment, they're really answering questions about their interests, their preferences, what they like about work and what they don't like about work as much. And then as a result, what they get, and you see the images on either side of the screen here, is a report. And the report kind of gives them a worker profile, if you will. It talks about their work styles, their preferences, lets them know where they excel and what they like about work. And then really the benefit then to Charter is then we deliver up to these individuals examples of, or we kind of grouped our jobs into broader job families. And so based on their preferences and their styles, we're letting them know what jobs at Charter are aligned with their interests and their preferences. And what you can see here is that they're then able to click on a link that will take them directly to our job site and to jobs that are active and posted. So hoping to really convert some of the individuals that you see I have in the middle of the slide. These are really the individuals that we're targeting and hoping to help with a tool like this. And really in the end also help Charter by bringing in talent into A, the organization, and B, the job that's the right fit for them, so that it isn't just a job, but instead it becomes a career path for them at Charter. Now, in full disclosure, we're just getting ready to launch this assessment broadly on April 1st. However, we did do an internal pilot of this, and the Fit Finder got overwhelmingly positive feedback from our employees who participated. In addition to reinforcing the accuracy of the results, many respondents commented that the assessment suggested career paths that they hadn't previously considered. And this is really the tie-in to that bias and how I set this up. We all have some self-limiting beliefs and biases about what we may or may not be good at. And the feedback that we got from them was one of the first indications that we got that we were maybe helping to overcome some of those. And the other thing that we found was that we got very positive feedback. And the positive feedback that we got was even more positive when we look at groups who are traditionally underrepresented at charter. So we looked at gender and ethnicity. In the purple here, I'm looking at females compared to males. And then we're looking at Black or African Americans, Hispanics or Latinos, and then whites in blue. And when we asked them 3 different questions about the jobs that were presented were interesting to me. You can see very positive reactions. Overall, I'm pleased with these jobs. Again, very positive reactions. And overall, these jobs are what I expected. And the interesting call out here is that, like, for example, if I look at this purple bar, I suggested, or the Fit Finder suggested jobs to females. 50% of the time, we were challenging their beliefs as to what they might be good at in the organization. And the group that actually saw the most surprise was actually our Black or African American employees. We see here that 55% of them were presented with jobs or career paths that they had not necessarily anticipated or expected. So again, this is just like some data to be able to look at to, again, kind of say that, yeah, we are able to use this and make suggestions to individuals that helps eliminate these self-limiting beliefs that they might have. And then I pulled out an example that's, obviously one of our most dramatic examples. But when we look at our field tech population, females are historically underrepresented in this job category. And this, you see, they're about 1% of the total population. And this is pretty much a reflection of what we see that comes in through the application funnel. So it's not like when I look at the applications, I'm getting 30 or 40% females and they're washing out somewhere in the selection process. Females are not applying to these jobs. But when we looked at the population that took the Fit Finder, Fit Finder suggested a career as a field technician to 27% of our female test takers. So we're now opening up this career path to people who otherwise would have never considered it, may never have considered it. And this is a real possibility for us to really be able to move the needle for female representation in this job. We're giving them a lot of data about themselves back that will ring true with them on a gut level. Yes, I do like to, work in this way, this way, this way. And they have all of this information on me, and they're saying that this is something I could do. And that can be a real confidence boost then to then convince somebody to click on that apply link. I included the Black and Hispanic numbers as well. You can see they're not nearly as dramatic, but we already had some much better representation when compared to females there. But we are still moving the needle with this in the direction of exposing this job at a higher rate than these groups are currently represented in the jobs. Okay. So that was an assessment and an example of something that we would use before anybody applies. What I'm going to talk about now are the assessments that we use after somebody has applied to a very specific job. And at Charter, we use virtual job tryouts for almost all of our high volume hiring. So these are things like our technicians, like our call center employees, and like individuals who are working in our retail stores. And I think one of the questions that I could get asked is, why invest the money into having an assessment as a part of this hiring process? And I think number one is that an assessment brings efficiency. I told you that we get 1 million applicants. Not all of them are for the high volume positions, but probably 600, 700,000 of them are for those high volume positions. And so the actual idea of going through resumes can be kind of daunting when we're talking about volumes like that. But even if you don't see volumes like that, where you are where you are considering your recruiting process, I kind of laid out 4 arguments why I would consider using an assessment in place of what I would consider to be a typical first screen, which would be a resume review. And the first thing is just quite simply, science tells us that an assessment is more accurate. I was recently reading, it was a study that combines a bunch of other studies. And they take all of these studies together to try to really prove, how much something predicts. And what they found was that past work experience, it doesn't predict turnover at all. It's a true 0 in terms of predicting turnover. And it's just like ever so slightly north of 0 effective in predicting performance. So a resume review is essentially not giving us a lot of information about candidates. The next thing is that an assessment is more job related, especially if a job does not have a lot of qualifications, or maybe the qualifications listed for the job are ones that are very easily obtained, like 1 year in a customer facing role or something like that. Then what you're going to look at in a resume, if there are no qualifications or very limited qualifications, there's either nothing to look for in the resume, or all resumes can meet that standard. My third reason is that it cuts out unconscious bias. An assessment isn't human. It doesn't use shortcuts for decision making. I have heard things said from recruiters like, oh, well, I noticed that a lot of the people who wash out of our classes come from Walmart, and so I now don't consider anybody who's coming to us like directly from Walmart. And I understand how humans are looking to find patterns in events, but working at Walmart isn't what makes somebody a poor fit for the next job. It's really more about what skills and abilities that person was bringing to the table. And somebody could have worked at Walmart and bring the skills and abilities that you're looking for to the table. So it's one of those kind of false conclusions that we draw because it's in front of us, and it's easy for our brain to make those associations and then to make those shortcuts to make decision making faster. That's what makes human brains efficient. Doesn't always make them accurate. And then some of you may say, well, right, but now we can train computers and we can use artificial intelligence to screen resumes and kind of help tier the candidates for us. And I agree, and that could end up being a very good option for you. However, you have to keep in mind that there's a potential there that this will just compound the bias that is already existing in your selection process. And what I mean by that is if you use your current employees and current resumes to build an algorithm to decide who gets hired and who doesn't, it's the algorithm and the machine is limited to the data that you've put into it. So it's never going to improve the quality of your candidate pool, and it's never going to improve the diversity of your candidate pool. That algorithm, if it's designed just with your current employees, is you are training it and designing it to select exactly what you have today. So if you are looking to make gains, then using an assessment that's built with solid science behind it is always going to do a better job. As well, and I've included some images from our VJTs here, it gives a way for me then to represent our brand to the candidate. It gives me a chance to show them exactly what the job will look like. It's a way for me to highlight Charter's commitment to diversity. And I'm able to do this all while I'm gathering job-related information from a candidate's competence in a number of job-related areas. Like you see on the right, a mock-up example of technical troubleshooting, like on my field technician assessment. And then what this does is this then, instead of the recruiter having to sort through candidates on the left-hand side of the screen or the funnel here, is the assessment is a way for me to look for candidates who have a high potential for success on the job and a high potential for retention. Put them into one category. People who have low potential for success and low potential for retention, those are individuals that I can put into a category that recruiters rarely, if ever, have to go into. I can have the ATS automatically disposition those individuals out if I want. This then allows my recruiters to manage their requisitions with science and data behind it, as opposed to first in, first up, first in, first interview, or different things like that, or erroneous decision making like, nah, this person came from Walmart. We haven't had success with people from Walmart before. And the last tool that I want to talk about is on-demand video interviewing. I included some visuals here of what the candidate experience looks like on the left and the right. I look like I'm completely stunned in the one, but it's very hard to grab a good screen grab of yourself. So what an on-demand, you may have heard of this as like an asynchronous interview, all sorts of different things, but it allows my recruiters to go in, enter questions that they want to ask of candidates. Then those get sent out to candidates, and candidates have the ability then to answer and record themselves answering at their own time. So no matter what their current work shift is, what kind of work-life family balances they're trying to work out, they don't have to schedule time in the middle of their day between where we would normally interview, stop life and interview. They can do this at the time that's convenient for them. And then the video response then can get sent back to the recruiter and or the hiring manager for evaluation, again, at their convenience. Back when we used to travel for work, I would sit and watch these while I was waiting in line at the airport and be able to go through and disposition candidates that way. So that was a great lift, and it's a great efficiency, and it's very convenient. But today I didn't bring you here to talk about how to make your recruiting process convenient. I talked about how to eliminate bias from your recruiting process. And really, these on-demand interviews kind of help you do this in a couple of ways. Number one is it eliminates the opportunity for the rapport building kind of conversations, which can lead to bias. And I'll give you a very silly basic example here, but you know, I always find myself, like if I'm walking somebody from the lobby up to an office to be interviewed, oh, you know, was the commute here okay? Were you able to find the office fine and everything like that? And then like, what if the candidate was like, oh yes, I was driving in from, and they mentioned that they live in the same neighborhood that I live in. Then I might read into the fact that they live in the same neighborhood as me. That means that they kind of like a fun or artsy vibe in their neighborhood. Maybe we have the same kind of values. And then maybe this person's really like me, and we really like people who are like us, because at the end of the day, we like ourselves. So that can then set me up to be predisposed to want to hire this person. And like I said in the beginning, the whole point of a bias-free hiring process is that it only includes job-related information. The neighborhood that you live in is not job-related at all. So it's little things like that that can influence your decisions. The next thing that it does is it ensures that all candidates are asked the same questions in the same way. It's computer administered. It's not different for any one person. And I always describe interviewing as you have to make sure that people are running the same race. So you can't put one person on a paved track, ask them to run a mile, and compare that time to somebody who's running a cross-country course, you know, through the woods and up hills, and compare that mile time with the one who was running on a track. And so, and even just like even if you are using an interview guide, it can still happen, even with the best of intentions. Even if you spend a lot of time training your interviewers, you can inadvertently change the race that each candidate is running. With an on-demand interview, that possibility just is not there. So I'm gathering consistent information from the candidates, and that then allows my recruiters or my hiring managers, whoever is making the decision at that point, to really compare performance on the exact same thing. And make a better error-free hiring decision. And then the last thing is, panel interviews are something that we encourage at Charter to make sure that we're getting diverse input into a hiring decision. But coordinating a panel interview isn't always the easiest thing to do. This on-demand interview is as easy as forwarding an email, and I'm then able to gather diverse opinions in a much easier way, a much faster way. So those are the ways that we really think that relying on this particular interview tool can really help us kind of eliminate bias, really only focus in on that job-related stuff, and focus in on making the best possible hiring decision. I thought that I would share this slide. I don't have to go into a lot of detail. I want to make sure that there's time for people to ask and have their questions answered. But there are a number of vendors out there that have a wide variety of offerings with these asynchronous interviews, where you don't even have to have a hiring manager or recruiter score them. And so I thought that I would just kind of lay out that when a product like this is presented to me in my role, some of the things that I need to consider when I'm evaluating if that would be a good decision, if my goal at the end of the day is to keep bias out of the interview. First, what is being measured? You would always want to make sure that you see those job-related competencies like you would see in an interview guide, problem solving, oral communication, interpersonal skills. You would want to see aspects like that being scored as opposed to just one overall score. It's fine if you get an overall score if there are competency scores kind of being combined in some way to yield that. How is it being measured? Is the vendor using like a voice to text transcription so that they're actually measuring what the person says and the content of it? I would just caution you to be wary of anybody who is using micro expressions, voice tone and inflection, and take a really serious hard look if what is being measured is, again, job related. Because like I said in the beginning, it needs to be job related in order for it to be bias free. What is the accuracy of the AI? And what you want to look for here is you want to look for a vendor who's looking to show you that their computer is scoring very similarly to how humans score. If they are using that voice to text transcription, how accurate are they able to do that? What kind of scores and ratings do they get back from that? I would be wary of anybody who tells you that, oh, it's accurate because we tie it to your KPIs. And then we give the highest scores to the people who are doing the best on the job. And really, the reason for that is the same as what I said about training AI and scoring of the automatic scoring of the resumes, right? If you're just using your current population to set the algorithm, you have no chance of improving your current population. So how is it built? Again, I don't need to repeat what I just said. And also, depending on where you are and where you're doing the hiring, you may have different state and local laws that govern the usage of that. Illinois, most notably, I think New York City is getting ready to pass something. But make sure that you know what your role is as the employer if you're going to use AI to score an interview, and that you stay up to date on that, because legislation is, tripping over themselves trying to catch up with where we've gotten with these products and with the scoring. So with that, I can pause and ask and see if there are any questions.
Well, thank you, Laura, for all this information. And we do have a question that's been posted in the chat box. In the Fit Finder assessment, are you running the risk of directing job seekers to jobs that they may not be qualified for?
Okay. That's a good question, right? Like you can imagine, right? You sit and you take the Fit Finder and it's like, oh my gosh, I would like to be a CEO. That's the job I'm best fit for. And the decision that we made is that we only have included, we're targeting our Fit Finder to those populations like transitioning military, people who are changing, you know, if you can imagine in 2020, people who might have been leaving the hospitality industry and trying to find a place in corporate America, or the utility or whatever you want to say. So we really have it focused on low barrier to entry jobs is what I call it. So if you have an advanced degree in, you know, data analytics, the Fit Finder is not for you. You would have a much easier time going to our career site, putting in data analytics as a keyword and finding jobs. We're really looking for those early career individuals.
Okay, and people are able to tell that when they come to the Fit Finder assessment that they need to go to another part of the website to look for the other type of positions.
They don't, they come to the job site and then you can, so it's more set up, the job site is set up for keyword searches, and it's like, not sure where you fit, take this to find out or whatever. Or we might use it in social media campaigns or campaigns with our CRM to transitioning military individuals, or if we have individuals who are just graduating high school, perhaps, or something like that. So it would be a much more targeted marketing approach for who we invite to take it.
Oh, okay. Well, as I ask Laura the next question, please do post your questions in the chat box. And the next question, Laura, is, do you find that candidates are resistant to taking an assessment in the hiring process?
No, no. I think that the use of assessments is fairly widespread. I can tell you that the biggest barrier that you would have to having candidates participate really in any part of your selection process is how convenient you make it for them. So when the assessments that Charter was offering were only able to be taken via a PC, we had a tremendous drop rate. Like 40 to 50% of the people would drop out because they didn't want to or couldn't find a PC to take the assessment. The VJT is mobile first technology. It's easy to be taken on smartphones. Same thing with the on-demand interviews. So as long as you're able to meet the candidates where they are technology-wise, we now find that we have, it really depends on the job. We have 90% take rates for most of our call center roles, which is amazing. It's outstanding. For our warehouse technician, that's, and our retail sales are definitely on the lower side. And they're more in the low 70% take rates.
Oh, okay. Well, and then I think the next question is, do you use on-demand video interviews at all levels in the organization, or is it just for the high volume, just as a high volume solution?
So I actually use assessments more for high volume, and I use the on-demand almost on the other side of the spectrum. It can be used for high volume. We have a couple of instances of that. But it seems to be a really good solution and a really nice sweet spot. Like if I'm going to hire somebody, it's a great way to screen somebody for technical skills, because I can post something, you know, like a talent acquisition assessment consultant or something like that, and everybody in the world will apply to it because they're, well, I have a recruiting background, and then all I have to do is ask the first question, you know, like, can you define validity for me? And then people are like, oh, no, wait, this job isn't for me, never mind. And so it's a really great first screen for jobs like mine. We've also found that it works really well for our executive leaders. And you know, typically you can imagine an executive goes through some initial screening, maybe has some conversations with the hiring leader, And then there's, maybe a 1 or 2 day on-site that they would bring people in for, where they might meet with, 6, 7, 8 people or whatever, who all spend, 30 minutes or whatever with that individual. We've taken the on-demand interview solution and replaced that on-site meet and greet with all of the stakeholders with that on-demand video. Again, it's an easy way for us to invite a bunch of people to be able to weigh in on the individual. It saves travel costs. My candidates no longer have to take 2 days off of their current work and perhaps travel. And so we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that particular use case from both the hiring leaders as well as the candidates.
Okay. Well, we have another question. What is the % of success rate for completing assessments for field tech openings?
The completion rate for field techs hovers right around 76%, give or take. Of course, it's going to vary a ton by job market, but I stay right around 76, give or take, for field techs.
Okay. Well, this next question is asking about assessments. Do you think the assessments accurately tell us how an employee is going to perform? I ask the question because some people will not do well, but perform well in their jobs.
Well, I think that can be said for anything, right? There are some people who aren't good interviewers and really lock up in an interview, but may be the kind of person that you come and you train them how to do the job and they just knock it out of the park. So I think that with any selection tool or device, assessments, interviews, resume writing even, right? There is a certain amount of confidence and competence that might come into play with that. So I don't disagree that there's always a certain amount of error with that. But, back in the day, so I can now say those kinds of things, assessments used to look like, and I don't know if there are any football fans here, where, they always talk about the Wonderlic scores that candidates, or that they give to football players, and you have to score in a certain range to be a quarterback, and certain scores mean that you can be a wide receiver, all of these different things. And if you've ever taken the Wonderlic, it's like taking a time machine back to school, and you're being asked about sides of a triangle, this and that and whatever. But I say all of that to say it looks nothing like playing football, or it looks nothing like the job of a field tech, or nothing. And was it predictive of those things? Yeah, it actually was. And I think in particular with the VJT, we have assessments that start to look a lot like the job. And what you find is the more something looks like the job and less like a test, the less error that there is with those individuals who might have test anxiety, or who might, again, probably from a self-limiting belief, say, oh, I'm just not a good test taker. So yes, error is still 100% possible in an assessment. However, if shopping for a good assessment can help you minimize the amount that happens.
So when you say, with the assessments, it looks more like the job. I know when you started off the webinar, you talked about how some of the job descriptions didn't seem to match what you thought they would be. Do you find that you're then changing the job description or the job title as you're doing more of these assessments?
That is a very, very interesting question. But you are talking to somebody who sits in the recruiting organization, and I don't own the job descriptions or the job titles. And that's one of the challenges of being in a large corporation, right? Is that's owned in the compensation world separate from me, and would be, there would be a lot of considerations to have to take into place to make that change. If I owned it, I would, and I don't.
That's very interesting, and that shows how all these pieces tie in together. I wanted to see if anyone had any additional questions before we close up the call. There's still an opportunity to ask questions. We've got some time on our hands. Well, I don't see anything coming up, but I'll give it another minute or two. And then Laura, is there anything else you want to add about the work you're doing and where it's, what direction you see this going in next for you?
Oh, wow. You could have asked me that this time last year and I would not have predicted where we ended up going in 2020. What I really see is I really see the need to really up our game in terms of if I'm delivering an automated solution or a technology-based solution like an assessment, like on-demand interviews, if I like AI resume screening, I need to deliver more to give recruiters more time to do the in-person, high-touch, consultative work that they need to do. And then the work that I need to deliver needs to continue to predict performance and turnover with equal amounts of accuracy. And the demand for that accuracy is just getting higher and higher and higher. So.
All right, well, thank you for sharing that. I want to thank Laura so much for her time today on this webinar and for sharing all the wonderful information and insight into mitigating bias. And I also want to thank our sponsors for this C2HR webinar and ask all of our members in our community to look forward to the announcement in April for our next webinar. Thank you all so much today for your time and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.